So Margaret got a very great introduction. You know her as a very funny woman and also very political. So we're going to cover some topics that mean a lot to her and some topics that mean a lot to us here at Brave New Films also. So we're just going to jump right into it.
Okay.
And I wanted to know why or how did you become political?
I think I never I never actually thought to become a political person. I think when I was about 5 years old, what I noticed about my parents, I come from a very immigrant background, and my parents came from Korea, and when they got here, they were so overwhelmed with work. I never had babysitters. Like, I never knew that people had them. So I was really pretty much unattended from a toddler on, and so I watched a lot of television growing up. That was sort of my babysitter. And I remember watching a lot of different shows, and one in particular, the Brady Bunch, really shocked me because I watched the Brady Bunch and I realized for the first time I was not white. And that was such a harrowing realization. Like, when you realize that you're not white, it's so weird because you just, because I would look at the television and then I would look in the mirror and I never saw Asian people, except there was one episode of the Brady Bunch where they did have an adopted Asian boy.
Really?
Yeah. Well, there was one really weird episode, but I think that was going to be a spin-off where they had a multiracial family, but that was just one. I remember that. But other than that, I had never seen it, and it was so alarming. So I think ever since then, I've always been very conscious of race and very maybe politicized against my will because of that, And my parents never really offered any explanations. I think because of our immigrant status. When I was born, 3 days after I was born, my father was deported. So ever since that happened, my parents spent a lot of time, or my whole family spent a lot of time making sure that I was going to be as American as possible. So they did not teach me Korean. If they spoke to me in Korean, I was forced to answer back in English. I was really not encouraged to learn a lot about the culture because they wanted to make sure that I was American, and they would present me.
Right.
They put me in the front of the family like, she's white, but I knew from watching the Brady Bunch that I was not.
Right.
So it was a very weird kind of social, cultural context to be in. And so I never really had any options out either. Korean culture, even though they wanted me to be American, they still had their traditional kind of attitudes. So they never really encouraged me to do anything or go anywhere. Like, I had a very different childhood from my brother. My brother is somewhat younger than me, and he was born after the family was a little settled. So he had more, he had babysitters.
Yeah, he didn't watch the Brady Bunch.
Yeah, he didn't watch the Brady Bunch. He also had a lot of support emotionally, and this idea that you could go into a career, whereas me, they were just kind of like trying to figure out what they would do, like, is she going to get married or what? Mm-hmm. So since I wasn't pushed in a particular career direction, I was able to kind of go off myself, and so I started comedy very young.
So it was kind of a blessing, actually.
It was actually a blessing. Like, I had the freedom to go forth and do something that wasn't defined. And I was in San Francisco, and then, the people that were around my family at that point were very politicized. There was a lot of, it was kind of like the 70s and the early 80s, and, there was a lot of queer politics just starting to, kind of, it was on the rise, and then, AIDS was happening, and so that was a lot of where I was learning about politics. And I remember even attending like Rock Against Reagan punk rock shows and stuff. Cool. And so this was all part of my consciousness kind of growing up, and that's how I think I became political. It wasn't that I intended to or that I had some sort of burning desire. It's just where I was and who I was. And
so do your parents kind of support you in being political, or they think like your comedy would be better without that aspect, or you kind of expose yourself, doing that, and what do they think about that?
Well, I think my parents at this point, they really enjoy it. You know, they really enjoy that I have a voice and that I have a perspective. I think that they were so afraid for so long of having any kind of political opinion because of what happened to my father. You know, that he was a victim of you know, our policy towards immigration, and so it was something they were scared to speak up. They were, you know, I understand that. You know, it's kind of like they didn't feel like they were worthy of a voice, and I think this is also an enduring problem for Asian Americans in this country, is that being neither black or white, we feel this inability to speak up because we don't seem to have the majority on our side, or that there isn't the same kind of race consciousness that there is for Asians as there is for black people, or for white people. It's a very weird place to be, and so I'm trying to change that by being visible and outspoken. But it's a weird place to be.
Do you think that's unique for the Asian American community, like more so than other minority groups?
I think it is. I think it is. I mean, I think in you know, in comparing ourselves to black and white race politics and talking about how it's just a weird, it's a question of identity and a question of, do we have a right to this identity or this fight for these civil rights?
Sure. Well, let's go. Let's move on to immigration then, because obviously that's something that is important to you. And in your DVD, Beautiful, you talk a little bit about securing our border and how oftentimes that's just kind of a mask for being racist against Mexicans. And now we have that SB 1070 law in Arizona, and anti-immigration law. And you know, what do you think about the state of immigration right now? Where is this going?
Well, it's very troubling because the only person that can say that they have really a right to the country is Native Americans. I mean, if you're going to talk about, you know, this being somebody's country, this really is, it's not, it doesn't belong to anybody except for immigrants. I mean, the country's built on immigration. And so when do you say that immigration has to stop? And it's just, it's this, I think it's so idiotic to think that these illegal immigrants are taking jobs that we, you know,
Totally.
it's they're not really thinking it all the way through, and so thinking that the ideal citizen of this country is white is such a major problem. But then again, you go, why do people think this? And I have spent now 2 years living in the South, the deep South. I'm in Atlanta now, which is a very progressive city, but I was in Peachtree City, Georgia, which is, even if you go outside of the perimeter of Atlanta, it just gets really country really fast. Like you drive,
what's that like?
Yeah, you drive down the freeway and then you see a big billboard that says "Actors and Models for Christ." And then you see another one that says South Atlanta Tea Party, and you're like, I'm in the wrong place. And then,
Is that big? South
it's
Atlanta,
huge.
Southeast quadrant of the Tea Party of Atlanta.
It's huge. And then you see people there, and they get real mad about immigration. They get really angry. And these are people that you think are nice and rational, but I realize they are really angry about certain things like immigration. They're really angry about gay marriage. I think because they feel like they're disappearing, that these cultures, their culture hangs on to these outmoded ways of thinking because they're becoming extinct. So,
do you think that would be a bad thing?
I don't think it's a bad thing, but that's why they hang on to it so hard. That's why the Tea Party is so offensive. That's why they go out of their way to be racist and they're just so awful. But I think it's because they realize that they have a limited voice and that it's actually growing silent, and so they have to be louder in any way they can.
I can understand that. So one of the other things that I know that you're passionate about was the BP spill and the capping of the oil spill. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, I don't know. Well, the capping is good. I'm glad that they've capped it. They've fucking waited so long to cap it. Why did you wait? So now we have so much pollution still. It's still the worst environmental tragedy in history. It's still the worst, and it still needs to be cleaned up. And So I spent some time in New Orleans, and I spent some time in Biloxi, and people are so angry. Like, it has more to do with the fact that it seemed that nobody cared really, like that nobody cared about this part of the country, that it was just kind of throw away area, when it's really, it's unfortunate. It's so much economic demise, so much human loss. I mean, not lives, but livelihoods, which is a really big deal. And it's major Vietnamese community there who's really struggling, because there are all these shrimpers and fishermen who have lost their livelihood, and a lot of those are immigrants, and a lot of those people, that's all they have, and that's all they had for generations. And so it's a very troubling situation. And then just the environmental problems, the wildlife and everything. So I work with the Institute for Marine Mammal Studies to what they do is they collect animals. They collect like turtles, not just mammals, but turtles and dolphins, and they wash them down with dishwashing liquid, and they clean out their mouths with this mayonnaise solution, and it makes them able to go back into the wild.
Like low-fat mayonnaise.
Yeah,
because you don't want those oil animals to get chubby.
But it's so, because they're swimming around in this, they're like, what the fuck? Like, it's so disgusting, and you can't just leave them like that.
Yeah, it's totally heartbreaking. I mean, I saw some of the images of birds with the oil all over them. They can't fly, and they can't get it off, and there's no way that they can survive that way without human help. Yeah.
They'll just die. And then if you take away one whole layer of the wildlife, that you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how you affect the rest of the ecosystem. So it's just a really big deal. It's not enough that we oust the head of not enough to oust Tony Hayward. It's not enough to get it capped. You have to actually clean it up.
Clean it up and then try to prevent it from happening again.
Yeah.
Right? So, well, that totally goes back to what you were saying about the Asian American voice, where that whole community of Vietnamese, fishermen, and all their livelihood is kind of now destroyed, more or less.
Yeah, it's destroyed, and then when does it come back? How do you help them, and how does it get fixed? I think, well, I visited the White House right after the oil spill happened, and President Obama brought on stage Pastor Vu, who is the spiritual leader of the Vietnamese community there, and he gave a speech, and he was talking about spreading the word about this community and talking about it, and so that's why I know about it. But most people wouldn't, because it's not really in the news. It's not really talked about it. It's just not. There's not a lot of attention paid, and I think that's because it's not. It is a racial thing again. Like, it is an Asian American community who is afraid of having a voice. Can we talk about this? Can we discuss this?
Absolutely. One of the political issues that you're most well known for, I think, is LGBT issues and being an advocate for same-sex marriage. And I'm kind of wondering how that came about as well. Like, when did that start, where you're like, yeah, I need to speak up and be an advocate and be a voice for this and really be kind of a hero to that community?
Well, I'm queer, and so it makes sense to me to talk about queer issues, and I always have. And my perspective as a performer was built on talking to queer audiences, talking about being gay, and it's my relationships with gay men, and my relationships within the community that really shaped me and built me. And I remember when Harvey Milk was assassinated, and that was such a crazy time. It was such a crazy time in San Francisco. Right afterwards, Jonestown happened, and I just remember a couple of weeks after Jonestown happened, it was such a crazy time. But my grandparents were having their 50th wedding anniversary. And so my mother, because she's cheap, booked the now vacant People's Temple because there was nobody in it. And so I just remember we're all in the People's Temple, and it was like 2 weeks after it happened, and we're just like, it's weird. It's weird. It's really weird.
Thanks, Mom.
And it was like, yeah, it's really cheap. Nobody want to come. Nobody care. So she took that opportunity to book the People's Temple. But I just remember that time as being a very crazy time in San Francisco because People's Temple, and there was like protests happening, these candlelight vigils for Harvey Milk. But that really made an impact on me. All the people that my parents employed were gay. And so they were mourning Harvey Milk and talking to me as just a young kid about what he was to them and who he was. And so that made a huge impact. And so from then on, it made it very apparent to me that something that I should be talking about and dealing with. And it was like, I think when I was really, really young, I remember there was a boy, I was probably like 8, and there was a boy in my class who was very gay. You know those kids who just can't hide it?
He's 8.
He was like 8. Super
How
gay.
is he?
But super just like, just with his book bag and just
and
really.
his crayons, just
and
hot pink everywhere.
But he only had like girls as friends and stuff, and people would say like behind his back, like faggot, faggot, faggot.
Really?
And I remember when people would say it, just the misery on his face, and I thought, I really took it in and I felt it, and I carried that. So I think that made me want to protect him, and that sort of was a metaphor for later in life. It made me want to help that fight.
Do you still know that kid?
No.
No, that's too bad. I wonder what he's doing now.
Yeah, he's super gay still.
He probably
he's in rollerblades somewhere. You don't even know. You don't know.
I didn't. That's very admirable.
Yeah. But there's like other. But there's times in my life where I've been more gay than other. Like I've been. Sometimes like when I was like 19, I was like, oh, I'm such a dyke. Like I'm gonna be just with women now, and I'm never. And then I sort of went into this period where I'm gonna be straight, and then I was like, no, I'm gonna only be with trans people. Like I went through all these different identities within the queer community, and now I just feel like, well, I guess I am everything.
Yeah, I mean, you're married now, right, to a man, which maybe a lot of people don't know. You guys have been married for 6 years now?
We've been married since 2003, so 7 years.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's great. How does he feel about you identifying as like everything from queer to bi and to I?
We have our own idea of what we want in our relationship, and he and I also, we have an open marriage, and that allows for me to be queer when I need to be. And we have like a old gay men who live in Palm Springs marriage where we're like real old and we have a lot of rings and we're just, we wear caftans. We're just really like,
We only have 2 dogs, so
yeah, many Maltese.
Yeah. Okay.
But we just have that. We have a really comfortable, but we're allowed to sort of do what we want. And for me, that's really important because I'm just not able to have that kind of traditional marriage.
Yeah, it works for you guys, and you guys seem to have a great marriage, 7 years strong. It's
good.
Yeah,
it's
great. So do you think that like being married to a man helps you or hurts you as an advocate for the LGBT community? Do you think people ever comment on that? Or?
Well, when I got married, it really committed me to the idea of gay marriage because it made me realize and understand how important marriage was. It made me see that what we need as a community is family, and the LGBT community desperately needs families. We need to build families so we can build a future so that we can have a whole generation of kids who are raised by LGBT parents. And that will make it clearer to the rest of the community that we belong here, the rest of the world that we belong here. And so that's what I think we need as a stepping stone in our society, especially our generation, because we come after the generation after AIDS. So many gay men died during AIDS that I feel like that there is a missing rung within the gay male community. So they don't have mentors as many as we should. And so there needs to be more of an emphasis on family and more of a way to make up for that. Like when people say that they're against gay marriage, when they try to talk to me about it, I just say, fuck you. No, seriously, fuck you. And, how fucking dare you? Like, I just get, I don't give a shit that it's your religious background. I don't care. Fuck you. Fuck your fucking God and your church. They're going to discriminate against people who just want to create families. Fuck that. Like, I'm so clear about it. And I think we need to be very clear about it and not be so like, well, it's because people's religious beliefs that they don't agree. And like, oh, fuck your fucking religious belief. That's bullshit. That's just bullshit. Because it doesn't affect anybody. That's why it makes me so angry, is that why do people care about gay people getting married? Why do people get angry? Like, it doesn't jeopardize your definition of marriage. Why would it? So that argument is not valid to me anymore.
I mean, do you think we'll be successful? We had a major, victory with President Obama, in 2008. Do you think that there's a victory in
There's
store?
a victory. I mean, it's ultimately there has to be one, because it's just the right thing. Because you can't argue with the Constitution or argue with the idea that equality is for all. It's not for just straight people. It's for all. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we have the argument is on our side that we are right. And so ultimately it has to go that way.
Well, another thing that people might not know that you're very very good at is you're kind of accomplished musician, and you're coming out with an album in August.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's called Show Dependent.
Yeah.
And it's it's a comedy album that I wrote with some of the greatest musicians, I think, of all time. They're people like Ani DeFranco and Fiona Apple and Patty Griffin and Andrew Bird and John Bryan and Grantley Phillips and Ben Lee and just amazing talented people. Because I wanted to make an album that was a comedy album, but it was it was really music that could endure beyond what we think of as joke songs, and so that's what
actually good.
Yeah, that's what I set out to do.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, well, we're gonna see a video. I think it's called "I'm Sorry" that you did.
Well, the story behind this song is very. It's kind of. I did a TV show in 1994 called All American Girl, and I had a very difficult time in the show. But one of the horrible things was I really fell in love with one of the writers from the show. I really loved him, and he didn't like me back, and I was really young. It was like a horrible.
What's wrong with him?
It was horrible, but it really broke my heart, and I never got over it, and I never forgot him. And it's been 17 years almost, and I never let go of loving him in my heart. Like he always lived there, and so when I turned 40, I thought I should find him, and I never searched for him because I knew that he was happy and probably successful and married with kids and living in a lighthouse somewhere. Like I was sure that he was so enjoying his life without me. But I thought, I'm 40 now, I should find out what he's doing.
Yeah.
And so I looked him up online, and it had his name, and American screenwriter, producer, worked on All American Girl with Margaret, and in 2007 was convicted of the murder of his wife.
Whoa.
He bludgeoned her to death and then stuffed her body in the attic of their house for a month until she had partially mummified. I know. I know. It's so horrible.
Man. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's horrible. So it's really good that we didn't hook up. Also, it shows that I'm not a good judge of character.
But maybe you could have changed him. You're very persuasive.
But I was really upset. Because I loved this guy. Yeah. Like I loved this person, and he was in my heart, and I'm like, what is wrong with me? And then I was like, that could have been me, but then it couldn't have been me. Like it was so complicated thinking about it. I felt so bad for this woman who had died, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And I was writing this album at the time, and I was working with Andrew Bird, and I thought about how in music, a lot of times strong women that I love, women like Billie Holiday or Etta James or Tammy Wynette, these women often sang a lot about domestic violence and about how they cope with abuse, and they had abusive relationships that they would sing about, and there was so much truth there. And I thought, I'm going to write a song dealing with my feelings about this, And I thought, I'm going to write it from his perspective, because he never apologized at all. Like, he really made it her fault. And so I wanted to sort of exercise that feeling. And so the song is, it has those roots. And it's the way that I deal with the tragedy of what happened is sometimes the only way to deal with it is through dark humor.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes the only way to survive it. And so I wrote this song. It's a pretty traditional country murder ballad, actually.
Yeah, it's like every other country murder ballad.
Well, there really is. Those stories are actually behind it, and so I live it, you know.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, let's take a look at it.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry I set your house on fire. I am a victim of my own desire, and I'm sorry I sent you that suicide letter. I was gonna die, but then I felt better, and I'm sorry I shot you in the face. I got this feeling I was way off base, and I'm sorry I killed you, dear. I only wanted you to be near.
Wow. Do you feel better now?
I feel better.
Yeah.